OK, Liam, I mean, how bad is this for people?
Well, I've just hot-footed it back from the Bank of England, and we did, as expected, get the 12th interest rate rise in a row. Rates have now increased from just 0.1%, those ultra-low, historically emergency levels at the end of lockdown, 0.1%, all the way up now to 4.5%. We can see the graph there. Back in 2017, 18, 19, interest rates were going up gradually to 0.75%. Then lockdown happened, 0.1%, the lowest in history. And there you see the escalator on the right, the staircase increase all the way up to 4.5%, the highest in 15 years. Now, this wasn't unexpected. If you are on a variable rate mortgage, this will add, you know, between 50 and, whatever, however high it goes, depending on the size of your home loan. But here's something quite interesting, Patrick. Did you know that of the 10.5 million mortgages in the UK, 80% of them are actually on fixed rates? So this won't immediately affect those householders. On the other hand, a lot of those fixed rates soon expire.
Yes.
And when they expire, people remortgaging, if they maybe got their mortgage back when those interest rates were really low, they're going to get a shock. So what we also got today from the Bank of England wasn't just that interest rate decision. We also got a much bigger quarterly assessment of the state of the UK economy.
OK, yeah, well, talk to me a bit about that, because, I mean, actually, that's growth numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, so the Bank of England, up until now, has been extremely pessimistic, and people like me have really criticised them, along with criticising the IMF, for being too pessimistic about the UK economy. Back in November, the bank was saying that the UK economy would stay in recession, with the economy getting smaller all of this year, 2023, and most of 2024 as well. They have now done a complete, what we call in journalism, reverse ferret on that. They have completely turned their telescope round the other way. Rather than being really, really pessimistic, they're now saying that there will be growth in the UK economy this year, and there will be growth in the UK economy next year. And that's just completely right. That is a recognition of reality. But that does mean that inflation could be higher than they otherwise thought it would be, because you've got that strength of growth. Now, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, after the interest rate decision happened, and I was talking to Mark Longhurst from outside the Bank of England at midday when it happened, then I scuttled inside and I spent an hour with the Governor and other senior officials, with other journalists, talking through. And the Governor said there that he thinks that inflation, currently 10.1%, will come down to 8.2% in what we call the second quarter. That's months 4, 5 and 6 of the year, so April, May and June. So, look, this cost of living crisis is easing. I think when the next inflation number comes out in a couple of weeks' time, the number for April, it will be much lower than today's 10.1% number. It will probably start with an 8. But the Bank of England is saying that it doesn't think this will be the last interest rate rise, because we are getting that growth. And indeed, financial markets have priced in now interest rates going all the way up to 4.75, even 5% over the summer months.
Now, I usually, in situations like this, and I think a lot of people do, they quite like someone to blame when things are going wrong. OK, is there anyone actually really to blame for this? Has this been bad management, fundamentally, of our economy? Well,
the Bank of England Governor and all the officials, they're very happy to blame Vladimir Putin. They say, oh, if it wasn't for the war in Ukraine, you know, if it wasn't for those pesky kids, as they used to say in Scooby-Doo. But as I often point out, and they don't thank me for it, UK inflation was already at a 30-year high before the war in Ukraine, in December and January 2022, before Putin invaded in February 2022. Look, there's no doubt about it. The war in Ukraine has massively aggravated inflation. It's led to a big spike in energy prices and, indeed, food prices. But inflation was already 5.5%, getting on for 3 times the Bank of England's 2% target before the war in Ukraine. So I think it's a combination of things. What I think the Bank of England did get wrong, and I've thought this for a long time, it used to be a minority view, it's now increasingly a consensus view. They didn't start raising interest rates quickly enough when it was clear before the war in Ukraine that inflation was coming down the track. A lot of this inflation we've got now isn't because of the war in Ukraine. It's not a cost of living crisis, Patrick, it's a cost of lockdown crisis. When you shut down the global economy for the best part of 2 years, and then suddenly you reopen it again, and businesses can't supply the goods and services quickly enough because they've been locked down for 2 years, then you're going to get a wall of demand hitting a fixed level of supply, and prices are going to go up. So we've had that lockdown, plus the war in Ukraine, that's brought us to this cost of living crisis.
Well, you've mentioned there the global lockdown, which it basically was. So how are we doing now in a global context, because all too often when we talk, there's negative stuff splashed across all of the front of the newspapers. Britain's in massive decline, and they don't factor in how we're actually doing compared to the EU, America, and other top nations.
Well, I've been a foreign correspondent in various parts of the world. I've never come across a media class like the Brits. We're so determined to talk ourselves down when a lot of the rest of the world is thinking, oh, Brits are doing pretty well.
Clearly, yeah.
Doing pretty well. So, look, the reality is we had a much deeper fall in our national income during lockdown than pretty much any other country. It's partly because of the way we measure it, partly because our lockdown was very, very, very harsh. And then we've bounced back. So in 2021 and 2022, you won't see this on the front of many newspapers, but the UK grew faster than any other G7 economy, even in 2022. Now, the IMF has says we're going to grow slower in 2023, and all the journalists, they report the forecast rather than the actual outcome from the previous year. I don't think we're going to be the slowest growing economy in the G7 this year at all. I think we're doing OK. Where we're not doing OK, Patrick, is on inflation. Because our inflation, as I said, is still 10.1%. That's the March number. The American April number, which comes out earlier than ours, is 4.9%. Much, much lower. So less than 5%. Even the Eurozone, which has had lots of wage inflation, lots of industrial unrest, you've seen that in Germany, you've seen that in France, their inflation rate is already down at 7%. Again, ours is 10.1%. So the Bank of England governor was saying for months and months and months, don't worry, old boy. Inflation's going to be transitory. It'll be fine. Far from transitory, UK inflation has been higher, it's persisted for longer, and it's been much more stubborn in terms of coming down than any other major economy. That's where we're not doing well.
Liam, thank you very, very much. Liam Halligan, our economics editor, with On the Money.